So same idea, we just swap the other side of the market. As the price changes, what's going to change about how responsive suppliers are to how responsive quantity supplied is to a change in the price. And just like with demand, the question, how easy is it to stop buying this thing? Or I guess start buying this thing works too. So the same sort of question applies here, but we can phrase it as how flexible is your production process? How quickly and easily can you change what you are doing, right? Because especially on the producer side, it's very easy to just change what you're going to buy. That's super easy. You swap out a couple things in your shopping cart online or in the store, and you're done. It's a lot harder to change what you're producing, right? You have to change to a different business, or like change out the machinery in your factory, or like train different workers, or whatever you're doing. It's going to be a little harder to switch over. So you have to ask, how flexible is that production process? So the question really is, imagine the price of the thing that you're making goes up, right? You think, wow, I'm going to be making a lot more money if I can just sell more of this thing. Can you actually do that? And if you can, then that's a very elastic supply response. But sometimes you can't. So a couple different ways that could pop up. If you want to do that, you have to have access to more inputs, right? Do you have access to those inputs? So some goods rely on very specialized inputs that can put a damper on how much more that you can get. The example that I have here is price of land in New York City. If you are a real estate developer, or a trader of real estate in New York City, and the price of land in real estate in New York City goes up, you can't just like make more of it, right? I mean, you could demolish a building and build a bigger building, but all the land is already used up. There's not really a whole lot more than you can do, right? They're not going to let you build in Central Park. So your quantity supplied can't really change all that much, even as the price goes up and up and up, right? You can't do it. A lot of different examples of this during the pandemic, right? Think about all the things that they couldn't really make anymore because they couldn't get the parts from overseas, right? You hear about like shortages of video cards because they can't get the chips in from China, or you hear about at the beginning of the pandemic they just didn't have enough factories to make the masks, right? That they all needed because they didn't have access to the inputs, right? They weren't able to scale up quickly. So even though people would have been willing to pay a whole lot of money for those video cards or masks or whatever, you can't respond to that change in what people are willing to pay because you just don't have the ability to produce any more than you're already producing, right? You don't have access to the inputs that you need. If you don't have access to more inputs than you currently have, you just can't make more. So that's going to be an inelastic response. Another way to think about this is what your alternatives are. If the price goes up, are there people who could switch in to making this good, right? So the price of something goes up, people are like, oh man, that thing's selling for a lot right now. I wish I could be making that instead of whatever I'm doing now. And if you can make that switch, then that's a more elastic response. Right? There's more people out there who could be making this thing. They're just waiting for the price to go up. So I gave the example of Uber, right? If the price of Uber, if Uber started paying $300 an hour, I'd be in, right? I'd be doing it, right? There are a lot of people who could potentially be driving ride shares if the price started going up to make it worth their time. So that'd probably be a very elastic supply, right? Price of what Uber pays goes up and up and up. There's lots of people out there who could start doing it and would consider doing so at the right price. So if the price goes up and there are potential producers ready to go into that market, that suggests a very elastic supply chain. Similarly, if it goes down, can the current producers find something else to do, right? If what Uber paid started dropping, and people who are doing it right now said, no, I don't really want to do this anymore, it's not worth my time, do they have something else they can go do instead? Because if they don't, they might be sort of stuck there, right? Even though the price is going down. So is there ability to get out? If there is, then you would expect that as the price drops, there's going to be more of a response. Is there an ability to come in? If so, you'd expect that as the price goes up, there's going to be more of a response. You're only good at one thing. Oops. Your supply cannot be particularly elastic, right? You can't do anything else. Yeah.
Like skill trade concept.
Come in?
Skill trade.
Oh yeah, like a skill trade kind of thing. Yeah. If you only have a certain kind of skill, you're very skilled in one thing and not anything else, then you're just sort of subject to whatever that thing pays, right? You can't really switch in or out, right? One example we'll go into later in the class, doctors get paid a whole lot, like medical doctors, right? They get paid a lot of money. And yet many of us don't do that, right? We choose not to become doctors because many of us do not have the skills to be able to switch into that industry, even though the price of it has gone up and up and up, right? One example where we do have an elastic response was in the past year with hand sanitizer, right? Price of hand sanitizer went up, super, super high, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, everybody wanted it, everybody could find it. And then like you had like the vodka producers being like, hey, I'll make hand sanitizer. I can switch all my stuff over to doing that, right? There were people available who could switch their production into the area where the prices were going up, right? So that would be an elastic response. Last one is time. Same thing as on the demand side, right? Certain changes just take more time than others, right? Price changes can take a minute for everybody to change their production process. Now, this is going to be a more important factor on the supply side, right, than it is on the demand side. Well, I should have written these things down. So it's going to be more important for time, right? Just because, sorry, go ahead. That was not a question. Okay. Because it takes a lot longer to change your production process. In most cases, production processes are slower to change than demand side processes, right? The price of a manicure triples. You can just stop getting a manicure tomorrow. But if the price of manicure triples and you were like, hey, manicure is really expensive right now, I want to open up a nail shop, it's going to take you a little while to get that going, right? So it's a slower response on the supply side than the demand side. And so you would expect that there's going to be this sort of like spread out, long and slow response to a lot of different price changes. Especially because you have to consider, okay, well, the price of a manicure just tripled. Is it still going to be tripled by the time that I open my shop? Maybe not. Maybe I just won't do it in the first place with the anticipation that it will go back down, right? So the time is going to be really important. It's going to take a lot of time. Like you can imagine a factory. You don't have to imagine a factory, but it's easy to think about. A factory's told up to make chairs. Price of chairs drops. You'd like to stop making chairs. You could start making other stuff instead, right? You've got all the wood tools. You could make tables instead, or birdhouses. But to do that, you'd have to, spend the time retooling all the machinery, hiring people who know how to make birdhouses, making sure you have a good design for your birdhouse, and that's all going to take a lot of time, right? And in the meantime, you're going to be stuck making the chairs that don't sell for any money, right? So in the short term, it's going to look like nobody's responding to a price change, even though in the long term, we are going to see those changes.